The introduction of live pick swaps and even using a post-trade period to do pick swaps makes mock drafting almost impossible. However, yes, I still want to do mock draft content, but I want to talk about the guy that is making that extremely difficult. Of no fault of his own, there is one draftee who could go to up to 5 teams and the draft still works, making my life extremely difficult. So instead of trying to justify it in a long-winded mock draft video, I'm going to do it right here because a Victorian goal kicker is giving me headaches, and it's not Aaron Cadman.
I don't believe it! I see it, but I don't believe it!
So for those of you that aren't quite the draft nuffy that I and plenty of both video and verbal experts are, I just call myself a draft nuffy. Matthew Jefferson might be a name that you recognise from his somewhat, in a footballing term, viral 7-goal performance against Western Australia. Now, yes, 7 goals is pretty extraordinary and fantastic in a national carnival, but what exactly pushes it over the top in terms of recognition? Well, that would come from his third quarter, in which he produced a 5-goal masterpiece in about 18 minutes. Jefferson has been on the radar for a lot of draft gurus, if you want to go with that title, for a while, but where Jefferson ends up seems to be a point of disagreement amongst everyone. So I'm going to give you the 5 teams that definitely can draft Jefferson as a need and a want, plus the club that I think needs him more than any other. So who drafts Matty Jefferson, to me, is one of the more interesting things about the first round. But let's go in draft pick order of where Jefferson might end up. But the Hawks need midfielders, I hear you cry, and yes, you are 100% spot on. As a Hawthorn fan, as you can probably tell by the premiership poster that is just kind of out of frame at the moment, but you can see about half of it, and the one that is behind me as I'm recording this, I completely agree. The Hawks do need midfielders. Now, Cooper Stevens, although he's going to be a nice piece from the Cats and a guy that I loved coming out of his draft year, the Hawks were 16th in the competition for inside 50s. So the guys getting it in there is going to be key, and the Hawks were pretty efficient going forward. For the opening 17 weeks of the 2022 Premiership season, the Hawks were a top 4 team of converting inside 50s to scores. It was definitely a case of quality, but not quantity. What they are going to need, though, is another tall forward to complement Mitch Lewis. Now, on the list now is Jacob Kazitsky, who is in the last year of his contract starting next season. It is going to be a career-defining year for the man currently wearing Hawthorn's infamous number 23. Jefferson would add a tall target, and he would start his career as the third tall, much like Jack Gunston did when he came from Adelaide at the end of 2011. Jefferson's solid, more than solid, goal kicking, his aerial presence, and his footy IQ would add a dynamic to the Hawthorn forward line that does look more exciting with its smalls, being your Chad Wingard and Luke Bruce for your experience, your Tyler Brockman, Sam Butler for your youth. The Hawks in the air are going to need help in their charge for another flag. They could be using their picks in the 40s to trade up with maybe a Brisbane or an Essendon who might need draft points to maybe pick up some good midfielders. At 24, there is still going to be some good midfielders there. And of course, next year's draft is being called a bumper draft as well. I'm not buying the hype that the Hawks are going to draft Jai Clark just yet. They definitely might. And Mateus Philippou is someone that I have really pushed for the Hawks to draft, but Jefferson still feels a need for the premiership side. Sam Mitchell knows they're not going to win a flag next week, so developing the midfielders that they do have and seeing if James Worpel can find his 2019 best and fairest form might be the direction. And Jefferson in a Hawthorn jumper as a Hawks fan would make me very happy. With the very next pick, the Cats at pick 7 have actually got a gluttony of options. Now, I believe Gold Coast at pick 5, which, yes, is going to be 6 after the Ashcroft bid is matched, are going to take Jed Buslinger. I really hope they do. The kid looks a star. And of course, what the Hawks do at 6 are going to open up players like Jai Clark, who might be your Selwood replacement and a guy who I still think is going to play 200 games of quality football. They've got the excitement machine of Bailey Humphrey, although that becomes less likely when you consider they got Ollie Henry and Tanner Bruin in the door. The likelihood of them taking a midfielder, considering they got Jack Bowes, and they've got guys like Brandon Parfitt, who can also roll through the midfield that didn't really get that job in the 2022 Grand Final, along with recently drafted Mitch Nevitt, again, a man that I was a massive fan of, coming out of his draft year. What Jefferson would do would be behind Hawkins and behind Jeremy Cameron and develop into one of the league's best for when he gets his go. Hawkins, although since he's turned about 28 years old, has become almost better and better and better with every passing season, he is not going to play forever. And for Jeremy Cameron to be the version that he was this year, which has looked career best, he needs to be able to move up the ground. He needs to be able to enter the ball inside 50 and also finish the work of others. Him delivering the ball to Jefferson once he gets some time under his belt in a post-Hawkins era could be an ultimately shrewd move by Andrew Mackie and Stephen Wells. I think Jefferson to Geelong is the one that's being talked about the least, and in terms of a footballing fit for the foreseeable future, is one that I like a lot. We probably wouldn't see him much throughout 2023, and yes, they've still got Asava Radigalia, but in the VFL, he was playing down back. Again, probably the most unlikely, but I do like it a lot. The Saints want a second pick inside the top 10, and if they do get it, one of them just has to be Matty J. What they do with the other, they could go in a bunch of different directions, but getting Zane Cordy in probably tells me they are going to look for a young midfielder to complement the likes of Winhager, Owens, and being around Steele and Brad Crouch, who of the recycled guys they've brought into that midfield, I think does complement a St Kilda midfield the best. Tim Membry is going to be so dangerous as a third tall option. And given the fact the Saints haven't picked up a ruckman to help Rowan Marshall, he does look like to be the number one man. Matty Jefferson in would require him getting, again, the third best defender, even though he would be playing a number 2 forwards role. The Saints have got plenty of small guys around the footy. Max King is going to need help if the Saints are going to improve moving forward. And once you get a new coach in the door and he's got 2 really, really good tall forwards to work with, as well as now with Josh Battle, Zane Cordy and Dougal Howard, some decent enough talls down back. Again, I think Josh Battle is a star, but they've got some depth in the tall areas. You can then work on the smalls. Jefferson to the Saints is probably less likely if they only have the one pick in the top 10. But if they do get a second, I would almost lock it in, and they might even use him first, as there are going to be good midfielder options with their second, including the likes of maybe Matthias Philippou. You've also got your Elijah Hewitt. They might take a punt on Ollie Hollins there. But if the Saints, again, if they get that second top 10 pick, Matty J, welcome to Moorabbin. I like this one a lot again. I know Jesse Hogan is still a tall and Jake Riccardi we're not 100% sure of, but the Hawks did it with Bud and Ruff in 2004, so why couldn't the Giants potentially package up a couple of their team picks, move up in the draft, and get their next 2 tall forwards for the next decade? If one of them is injured or they're going to take more time, then they can absolutely have some time off in 2023 and develop. Or could you play Hogan out of the square, these 2 guys as your 20 to 50 metre style players? And given that Cadman is Jeremy Cameron light, he'll be able to work up the ground and Jefferson be your actual centre half forward, even though they're about the same size. GWS have enough midfielders, even with Hopper and Taranto going. Josh Kelly will play permanent mid. Canelio will be back in the midfield. Tom Green hopefully takes that step and becomes a bona fide star in that midfield without getting shunted, put on a wing, half-forward flank, and all that jazz. They are going to have to package up those picks, like I said, so their draft might be these 2 and a guy later in the draft. If they can keep one of their team picks, then by all means, take the best available. But the Giants need to be building their spine for the next premiership push, and why not start with the guys that score This, along with Geelong, does seem the most unlikely, and I do like the Geelong fit more than the Giants. But I think this would be a fantastic way for Jason McCartney to kind of revert from his go-home factor and try building a culture that is going to keep young Victorians. But there is one team who is going to need to trade up and try to pick him up. How they do it, I'm not quite sure. They're probably not going to want to trade out of the first round next year, so it might be too little too late. But there is one team who played finals last year that is screaming for Matty Jefferson to walk in the door, and it's this one. But Daz, I hear you cry, they've already picked up Dan McStay and Billy Frampton. Well, McStay isn't going to be there for the next decade, and Billy Frampton has shown a lot more down back than he has up forward. The Pies really just need someone to be able to compete, take a grab, but not be outmarked. That's the number one thing. They're going to have the gluttony of smalls. You've got your Beau McCreary, Jamie Elliott, Jack Ginnivan. You're going to have Bobby Hill. Ash Johnson is going to be fantastic for depth. I would have Hill over Johnson in my round one team. Having Jefferson pluck some grabs and work his way into the AFL system is going to make Collingwood better. Dan McStay and Matt Jefferson as your starting tall forwards, with Billy Frampton down back adjusting himself to a new life alongside Darcy Moore and Jeremy Howe, so he's not going to need to play on number one defenders, is going to make Collingwood better. I love that Collingwood picked up Tom Mitchell in terms of they need their first touch around the clearances. They're not going to win 12 close games again in 2023. So getting their hands on the footy first is going to be imperative. But if they are going to build a sustainable premiership list, they need someone who can take a grab inside 50. And developing Jefferson early at the sacrifice of maybe someone in the 2023 draft is, I think, a risk that they are going to have to take. They are going to have to get in the top 10, though, as Carlton's pick 10, I think, might be too little too late, with Hawthorn, Geelong and St Kilda likely to snap him up before then. But if they do trade up for 10 and Jefferson is still on the board, it might be the biggest win on draft night for me. Collingwood, Graham Wright, whoever is running your drafting team, if Matthew Jefferson is on the board at 10, do a deal with Carlton. Carlton don't need a lot. They can trade back and pick up an asset for the next year. Do the deal, pick him up, and watch him blossom into a fantastic tall forward for the Pies. So comment below, let me know where you think Matt Jefferson is going to be playing in 2023 and why. Also, let me know your favourite prospect for your club that you think that they will be able to pick up. I'm not sure what's coming in terms of mock draft content because of the complexities, but I promise you I'll be figuring that out and stuff is coming. Plenty going on. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much to everyone who made the Brett Ratton video blow up. The Brodie Grundy video's got less than 100 views. The Ratton video has over 1,100. So I appreciate the love. Until next time, thank you, Mitch, for making the thumbnail. Goodbye.